If you take anything away from this extra hour today, let it be this: bees don't need us to know more, they need us to understand them better. Do you know that in the next 30 years, the way we produce our food will change more radically than in the last 300 years combined? And if you don't stay until the end of this video, you'll miss why this affects you directly, even if you've never seen a bee up close. What you're about to hear isn't just about beekeeping. It's about your future, your food, and the world you'll leave to the next generations. Today we're going to talk about the future of beekeeping, but not in the traditional way you probably expect. We're going to explore how this ancient craft is being transformed by the climate crisis, technology, and a new generation of beekeepers who are rewriting the rules of the game. I promise you that by the end of this talk, you'll never look at a bee or your plate of food the same way again. Let me start with a confession. 20 years ago, when I began in this world, I thought beekeeping was simply about producing honey. You placed your hives in the field, the bees did their work, and you harvested the liquid gold. Simple, right? How wrong I was. The first time I really understood what beekeeping meant was on a cold March morning in 2004. I had lost 30% of my colonies over the winter. 30%. I remember standing there, surrounded by silent hives, feeling like I had failed. But that morning changed everything for me, because I realized that beekeeping wasn't about controlling nature. It was about understanding it, respecting it, and working with it. That's when my real education began. And that's exactly what I want to share with you, not theories from a textbook, but real experiences, hard lessons, and hope for what's coming next. You see, we're living through the most critical moment in the history of pollination. The bees are telling us something. They've been telling us for years, but are we listening? Climate change isn't some distant threat anymore. It's here, it's in every hive I open. Last spring, I witnessed something I'd never seen in 2 decades of beekeeping. My colonies started their spring build-up in February. February? That's a full month earlier than normal. You might think that's good news. More time for the bees to grow, right, Ron? When the bees emerge early, but the flowers aren't blooming yet, disaster follows. The colony burns through its winter stores expecting nectar that isn't there. It's like waking up starving and finding your refrigerator empty. Now multiply that by thousands of hives across entire regions. But here's what keeps me up at night, and what should matter to you. Even if you don't keep bees, 1/3 of everything you eat depends on pollinators. 1/3. The apple in your lunch? Pollinated by bees. The almonds in your morning cereal? Bees. The coffee you can't live without? You guessed it, bees. And we're losing them. Not slowly, rapidly. The statistics are staggering. In some regions, beekeepers are reporting losses of 40, 50, even 60% of their colonies each year. Imagine if 60% of cattle died every winter. There would be a global emergency declared. But because bees are small and we don't see them every day, we somehow think it's less urgent. It's not. This is where modern, ecological beekeeping comes in. And this is where everything I'm about to tell you gets interesting. Because we're not just talking about saving bees anymore. We're talking about redesigning our entire food system from the ground up. Let me paint you a picture of what ecological beekeeping actually means. Because it's not what most people think. Traditional beekeeping, the kind practiced for centuries, worked beautifully in a stable climate with diverse landscapes. But our world isn't stable anymore. The old methods, as romantic as they are, aren't enough. And industrial beekeeping, the kind that treats bees like machines, is actively making things worse. Ecological beekeeping is different. It's about creating resilient systems that work with nature, not against it. It's about understanding that a healthy bee colony is worth more than the honey it produces. It's about biodiversity, soil health, and integration with other forms of sustainable agriculture. Here's a real example from my own operation. 5 years ago, I made a decision that many people thought was crazy. I reduced my number of hives by half. Yes, you heard that right. I cut my operation in half. My fellow beekeepers thought I'd lost my mind. Why would anyone voluntarily produce less honey? But here's what happened. Instead of cramming hives into every available space, I spread them out. I planted wildflower quarters between my apiaries. I stopped treating my bees with synthetic chemicals and started focusing on breeding strong, resilient colonies. I integrated my hives with a local regenerative farm that raises sheep and chickens. The first year, my honey production dropped. I won't lie about that. But by year 3, something remarkable happened. My winter losses went from 35% down to 12%. 12%, my colonies were healthier, stronger, more productive, and the honey, the quality was unlike anything I'd produced before. But the real revelation came from an unexpected source. The farmer I was working with noticed something. His pastures were more productive. His soil tests showed improvement. The sheep were healthier. Why? Because the diverse wildflowers I'd planted for the bees were enriching his pastures. The bees were pollinating plants that fed the soil microbiome. Everything was connected. This is what I mean by ecological beekeeping. It's not just about the bees. It's about building integrated systems where everything supports everything else. The bees support the plants support the soil supports the livestock through their grazing patterns, support the plants. It's a circle, not a line. And this brings me to something crucial that I need you to understand. Asterisk, stay with me here, because what I'm about to explain will change how you think about food production forever. We've been taught to think about agriculture in compartments. Here's where we grow crops. Here's where we raise animals. Here's where we keep bees. Each one separate, specialized, optimized for maximum output. But nature doesn't work in compartments. Nature works in systems, and when we try to fight that, we lose. I learned this lesson the hard way. In my early years, I had an apiary next to a conventional cornfield. Every year, like clockwork, I'd lose colonies right after the farmer sprayed his crops. I'd complain. He'd shrug. We were both trapped in a system that pitted us against each other. Then I met Maria. She was a young farmer, fresh out of agricultural school. But she had ideas that were old as dirt. Literally, she talked about soil health like it was a living thing. She rotated her crops with cover crops. She integrated small numbers of cattle into her crop rotation. And she wanted bees, lots of them. We struck a deal. I'd place hives on her farm. And in exchange, she'd plant pollinator strips and manage her land without synthetic pesticides. I was skeptical. How could she farm without chemicals and still make money? 3 years later, her farm was producing more food per acre than her conventional neighbors. More food, better soil, higher profits. And my bees, they were thriving. Her farm had become an oasis in a desert of monoculture. This is the model we need to be moving towards. Not bigger farms with more chemicals and fewer species, but integrated operations where diversity is strength, where every element supports the others, where ecological principles drive decision-making. Now, let me tell you about something that's happening right now, in cities around the world that most people have no idea about. Urban beekeeping. And before you roll your eyes, thinking this is just a hipster trend, let me explain why this matters more than you. Cities are becoming refuges for pollinators. I know that sounds backwards. How can concrete jungles be better for bees than the countryside? But it's true, and the reasons are both fascinating and deeply troubling. In many agricultural areas, the landscape has become so simplified, so dominated by single crops, that there's nothing for bees to eat for most of the year. A field of almonds blooms for 3 weeks, then nothing. Canola for a month, then nothing. It's like living in a restaurant that's only open 1 month a year. But cities are surprisingly diverse. Parks, gardens, street trees, balcony planters. Someone is always growing something. There's always something blooming. And here's the kicker: studies are showing that urban bees often have lower pesticide exposure than rural bees. Think about that for a moment. I started my urban beekeeping project 7 years ago on a rooftop in Manchester. People thought I was insane. Who keeps bees in the middle of a city? But that first season taught me something profound. Those urban colonies thrived. They had access to diverse forage year-round. The urban heat tile in effect actually extended their foraging season, and the local community embraced them. But urban beekeeping isn't just about producing honey in cities. It's about education. It's about reconnecting people with where their food comes from. It's about creating green corridors through concrete landscapes. Every rooftop garden, every pollinator-friendly park, every balcony full of flowers becomes part of a network supporting not just honeybees, but all pollinators. I'll never forget the day a school teacher contacted me. She wanted to start a hive at her primary school. I was hesitant at first, kids and bees? But she convinced me, and we set up an observation hive where students could watch the colony without getting stung. The transformation in those kids was incredible. Suddenly, they cared about flowers. They noticed butterflies. They asked questions about ecosystems and climate change. One 10-year-old started a campaign to get her apartment building to plant a rooftop garden. That's the power of urban beekeeping. It creates ambassadors. It makes the invisible visible. It connects abstract environmental concerns with something tangible you can see and taste. But let's be clear about something. Urban beekeeping alone won't save the bees. It's part of a larger puzzle. And that puzzle includes some uncomfortable truths about biodiversity loss that we need to face head on. Here's something most people don't realize. When we talk about saving the bees, most people think about honeybees. But honeybees are actually just one species. There are over 20,000 species of bees in the world. 20,000. And many of them are in far worse trouble than honeybees. Solitary bees, bumblebees, mining bees, carpenter bees. These native pollinators are often more efficient at pollinating certain crops than honeybees. But they don't make honey, so they don't get the attention. They don't have beekeepers advocating for them. They're disappearing silently. I remember the first time I truly understood this. I was walking through what used to be a wildflower meadow near my childhood home. It had been converted to a golf course. Perfectly manicured grass as far as the eye could see. Beautiful in a sterile sort of way. But silent, no buzz, no movement. The bumblebees that used to nest in the unmowed edges were gone. The mining bees that emerged every spring from the bare soil patches had nowhere to live. That's when I realized that saving pollinators isn't just about managing honeybee hives better. It's about protecting habitat. It's about leaving wild spaces wild. It's about understanding that a messy garden is often healthier than a perfect one. This is where modern ecological approaches become crucial. We need to think beyond honeybees. We need to create landscapes that support all pollinators. That means diverse plantings. That means leaving dead wood for cavity nesting bees. That means bare soil patches for ground nesting species. That means accepting that not every square meter needs to be productive in the conventional sense. I've started incorporating this thinking into my own land management. Instead of mowing everything, I leave sections wild. I have log piles and brush piles. I have areas of bare ground. My neighbors think it looks messy. But you know what? It's alive. It's buzzing with activity. And that diversity is supporting my honeybees too. Because here's the thing about biodiversity. It's not just nice to have. It's essential for resilience. A system with only one or two species is fragile. When conditions change, when disease strikes, when climate shifts, that system collapses. But a diverse system, it bends, it adapts, it survives. This principle applies to everything in ecological agriculture. Diverse crop rotations are more resilient than monocultures. Integrated livestock systems are more stable than specialized operations. And diverse pollinator populations are more reliable than depending on a single species. Let me share something that happened just last year that perfectly illustrates this point. We had an unusually cold, wet spring. My honeybees could barely fly for 3 weeks straight. If I were a farmer depending entirely on honeybee pollination, I would have been in serious trouble. But you know what I noticed? The bumblebees were still out there working. They can fly in colder temperatures than honeybees. The native mason bees were active too. Between them, they got the job done. That's resilience. That's why biodiversity matters. Not for some abstract environmental reason, but for very practical, economic, survival reasons. Now, I want to shift gears and talk about something that makes many traditional beekeepers uncomfortable. Technology, because the future of beekeeping isn't just about going back to old methods. It's about combining traditional wisdom with modern tools and smart ways. I resisted technology for years. I was a purist. I thought real beekeeping meant doing everything by hand, by instinct, the way it had always been done. But I was wrong, not completely wrong, but wrong enough that it was limiting what I could achieve. The turning point came when I lost an entire apiary to a disease outbreak that I didn't catch in time. 30 hives, gone. If I had been monitoring them more closely, if I had caught the signs earlier, I could have saved most of them. But I was managing over 200 hives spread across multiple locations. I couldn't inspect every hive every week. It was physically impossible. That's when I started exploring technology. Not to replace my skills and judgment, but to enhance them. To give me information I couldn't get otherwise. I started with simple hive scales. They measure the weight of the hive continuously. Suddenly, I could see exactly when the nectar flow started and stopped. I could see if a hive was consuming stores too quickly. I could detect swarming before it happened because the weight would drop suddenly. This one simple tool transformed my understanding of what was happening inside my hives. Then I added temperature sensors. Inside the hive, bees maintain a very specific temperature in the brood area, around 35 degrees Celsius. If that temperature drops or fluctuates, something is wrong. The queen might be failing. The colony might be weak. The four sensors. It only discovered these problems when I opened the hive, which might be weeks too late. Now I get alerts on my phone. But here's what's important. Technology doesn't replace the beekeeper. It empowers the beekeeper to make better decisions. I still need to understand bee biology. I still need to know what actions to take based on the data. The sensors tell me what to look closer, but they don't tell me what to do about what I find. This is where a lot of people get technology wrong in agriculture. They think it's about automation, about removing the human element. It's not. It's about augmenting human judgment with better information. It's about working smarter, not just harder. I've seen operations where they've installed thousands of dollars of sensors, but don't understand their bees well enough to interpret the data. That's useless. But when you combine deep knowledge with good data, that's powerful. Let me give you another example. Varroa mites. These parasites are one of the biggest threats to honeybees worldwide. For decades, beekeepers have been treating them with chemicals, but the mites are developing resistance. The treatments are becoming less effective, and the chemicals themselves can harm the bees and contaminate the honey. The old approach was to treat on a schedule. Every fall, apply treatment, but that's crude. It's like taking antibiotics whether you're sick or not. The new approach uses monitoring technology. You can count mite levels precisely. You can track treatment effectiveness in real time. You can make decisions based on actual infestation levels rather than assumptions. And here's the crucial part: you can breed for resistance. This is where genetics and technology intersect with traditional beekeeping. For thousands of years, beekeepers have selected their best colonies to breed from. But best for what? Usually honey production or general temperament. Now we can select for mite resistance, for disease resistance, for climate adaptability. I'm part of a breeding cooperative where we're selecting for bees that can groom mites off themselves. It's a natural behavior that some colonies exhibit more strongly than others. By carefully tracking which colonies have this trait and breeding from them, we're creating populations that need fewer treatments. This isn't genetic modification. This is selective breeding, the same process humans have used for 10,000 years to domesticate crops and animals. But now we have tools to do it more precisely, more quickly, more effectively. And this is crucial because climate change is accelerating. We don't have centuries to adapt. We need bees that can handle temperature extremes. We need bees that can cope with shifted flowering times. We need bees that are resilient to new pests and diseases that are moving into new territories as the climate warms. This is happening right now, by the way. Pests that used to be killed off by cold winters are now surviving year-round in areas where they never could before. New diseases are appearing. Flowering patterns are shifting. If we rely only on the bees we have now, without actively selecting for adaptability, we're going to lose. But here's the hopeful part. Bees are incredibly adaptable. They've survived ice ages and warm periods. They've spread to every continent except Antarctica. They have the genetic diversity to handle change. Our job is to help them access that diversity, to give them the best chance to adapt. This is what modern ecological beekeeping looks like. It's not romantic, it's not simple, but it's effective, and it's necessary. Now, let me talk about something that bridges everything I've discussed so far: the integration of beekeeping with regenerative livestock farming. This is where the future really gets interesting, and where I've seen the most dramatic results. Most people think of beekeeping and livestock farming as completely separate activities. You have your bee guy and your cattle rancher, and never the two shall meet. But this separation is artificial and counterproductive. I started working with a regenerative grazing operation 3 years ago. The farmer, Tom, rotates his cattle through small paddocks, moving them every day or two. This mimics how wild herbivores used to move across landscapes, grazing intensively but briefly, then moving on. It gives the plants time to recover and actually stimulates growth. When I first proposed putting hives on his land, Tom was skeptical. He worried the cattle would knock over the hives. I worried the cattle would eat all the flowers. We were both wrong. What actually happened was synergy. The cattle's grazing stimulated flowering in the pasture plants. Clover, which might bloom once in an unmowed pasture, would bloom multiple times when grazed correctly. The bees had more forage. The cattle got better nutrition from the diverse pasture. And the whole system became more productive. But it goes deeper than that. The cattle's manure feeds the soil. Healthy soil grows more diverse plants. Diverse plants support more pollinators. More pollinators mean better seed production. Better seed production means more forage for the cattle. It's a virtuous cycle. We started measuring things. Soil organic matter increased by 2% in 3 years. That might not sound like much, but it's huge. Each percentage point of organic matter means the soil can hold thousands more gallons of water per acre. In an era of increasing droughts and floods, that water holding capacity is gold. The plant diversity increased too. Species that hadn't been seen on that land in decades started reappearing. Not because we planted them, but because their seeds had been lying dormant in the soil, waiting for the right conditions. The right conditions turned out to be diverse grazing patterns and reduced chemical inputs. And here's what really blew my mind. Tom's veterinary bills dropped by 40%. 40% his cattle were healthier. Why? Because they were eating a more diverse diet with more medicinal plants. Because they were moving more, which is what cattle are built to do. Because the whole system was healthier. And health is contagious just like diseases. This is the model we should be moving toward everywhere. Not separated, specialized operations, but integrated systems where each component supports the others. It's more complex to manage, it requires more knowledge, but it's more resilient, more productive, and more profitable in the long run. I've seen this pattern repeated across different operations now. Bees with pastured chickens, bees with sheep, bees with pigs in orchards. Every time, the integration creates benefits that neither operation would see alone. And this matters for climate change too. These integrated systems sequester carbon. They build soil instead of depleting it. They're working with natural cycles instead of fighting them. They're part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Let me get specific about carbon for a moment, because this is important. Conventional agriculture is a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions. Tilling releases carbon from the soil. Synthetic fertilizers require enormous amounts of energy to produce. Pesticides and herbicides have their own carbon footprint. Transportation, processing, all of it adds up. But regenerative systems can actually be carbon negative. The plants pull carbon from the air through photosynthesis. Some of that carbon goes into the soil through root exudates and decomposition. If you're building soil organic matter, you're sequestering carbon. You're pulling it out of the atmosphere and storing it underground. Tom's operation is now sequestering an estimated 15 tons of carbon per year per 100 acres. He's being paid for carbon credits. His cattle operation is actually fighting climate change while producing food. That's not theoretical. That's happening right now. And the bees, they're essential to the whole thing. Because without pollinators, you don't get the plant diversity. Without plant diversity, you don't get the deep root systems that build soil. Without healthy soil, the whole system falls apart. This is why I say that beekeeping matters even if you never eat honey. The bees are keystones, remove them, and the whole arch collapses. Asterisk asterisk if you're finding this valuable. If you want to learn more about these connections between beekeeping, agriculture, and climate solutions, please subscribe and hit that like button. This is the kind of content I'm passionate about sharing, and your support helps me reach more people who need to hear this message. Now, I want to address something that might be on your mind. This all sounds great in theory, but is it practical? Can it scale? Can it feed the world? These are fair questions, and the answer is yes, but not in the way most people think. We're not going back to everyone having a small mixed farm. That's not realistic and probably not even desirable. But we can move toward more integrated operations at various scales. We can have large-scale regenerative ranches. We can have urban food forests. We can have suburban gardens that contribute to local food security. The key is diversity of approaches matched to local conditions. What works in California won't work in Scotland. What works on 10 acres won't work on 10,000. But the principles remain the same. Work with nature. Build soil, support biodiversity, integrate systems. I've consulted with operations ranging from backyard beekeepers to commercial apiaries managing 10,000 hives. The scale changes, but the fundamentals don't. Healthy bees need diverse forage, clean water, minimal chemical exposure, and good genetics. Whether you have 2 hives or 2,000, those needs remain constant. What does change at scale is the systems you need to manage complexity. A hobbyist with 5 hives can remember the history of each colony. A commercial operator needs databases and tracking systems. But both need to understand bee biology and behavior. Let me tell you about one of the most successful scaled operations I've seen. It's in New Zealand. They run 4,000 hives across regenerative farmland. They're producing manuka honey. But that's almost secondary to what they're really doing. They've created a landscape level system. They worked with 20 different landowners to plant corridors of native plants connecting forest fragments. These corridors provide year-round forage for the bees and habitat for native wildlife. The landowners benefit from improved pollination of their crops and pastures. The whole region benefits from improved biodiversity and ecosystem health. The operation uses technology extensively. Every hive is a QR code. Every inspection is logged digitally. They track genetics, health metrics, production data, but they also employ experienced beekeepers who understand the bees intimately. The technology serves the beekeepers, not the other way around. And they're profitable. Very profitable. Because they're producing premium honey. Yes, but also because their costs are lower. Healthier bees mean fewer treatments. Better forage means less supplemental feeding. Integration with the land means the land supports the bees and the bees support the land. This is proof of concept at scale. It can be done. It is being done. But I'm not going to pretend it's easy. The transition from conventional to ecological management is challenging. You're changing established systems. You're learning new approaches. There's often a transition period where things get harder before they get easier. When I first stopped using synthetic treatments in my hives, my losses increased for 2 years. It was brutal. I questioned my decision constantly. But I stuck with it, kept selecting the strongest colonies, kept improving my management. By year 3, my losses were below where they'd been with treatments. And I had bees that could survive without chemical crutches. That transition period scares people. It scared me. But here's what I learned: the conventional system is failing anyway. Winter losses keep increasing despite more and more treatments. The old approach isn't working, so the question isn't whether to change, it's when and how. The beekeepers who are thriving right now, who are excited about the future, are the ones who've embraced ecological principles. The ones still trying to make the old industrial model work are struggling and burning out. This applies beyond beekeeping too. The farmers making money and building resilient operations are the ones thinking about soil health and integration. The ones doubling down on monocultures and chemical inputs are on a treadmill that keeps going faster. Change is happening whether we want it or not. Climate change is forcing our hand. The question is whether we'll manage that change proactively or react to crisis after crisis. And this brings me to urban beekeeping's role in all of this. Because cities are where most people live now. If we're going to build support for the changes agriculture needs, urban populations need to understand what's at stake. Urban beekeeping creates that connection. When people see bees in their city, when they taste honey from their neighborhood, when they watch a hive being opened at a community garden, something shifts. The abstract becomes concrete. Climate change isn't just polar bears anymore. It's the bees on their rooftop struggling with shifted seasons. I've seen this transformation hundreds of times. Someone takes a beekeeping class out of curiosity. Within months, they're planting pollinator gardens, attending city council meetings about pesticide use, shopping differently at the grocery store. The bees become a gateway to broader environmental awareness, and cities are starting to respond. I'm seeing more and more urban policies that support pollinators. Green roofs, pesticide-free parks, native plant requirements in new developments. These changes benefit all pollinators, not just honeybees. London has created pollinator corridors across the entire city. Paris has banned pesticides in public spaces. Copenhagen has green roofs on bus stops. These aren't small pilot projects anymore. These are citywide transformations driven by recognition that urban biodiversity matters. But urban beekeeping has to be done responsibly. Just dumping hives on every rooftop isn't the answer. You can actually have too many honeybees in an area, which can outcompete native pollinators for resources. Urban beekeeping needs to be part of a broader strategy that includes habitat creation and support for all pollinators. This is where education becomes crucial. Every urban beekeeper should understand they're stewarding more than just their hives. They're part of an urban ecosystem. Their decisions affect wild bees, butterflies, birds, and the broader community. I require everyone who places hives through my urban program to commit to planning pollinator habitat and learning about native bees. The goal isn't maximum honey production. The goal is creating resilient urban ecosystems that support diverse life. And you know what? When you approach it this way, the honey production takes care of itself. My urban hives produce just as much as my rural ones, sometimes more because they have access to such diverse forage. There's something else happening in cities that excites me tremendously. Vertical farms and rooftop gardens are becoming more common. Many of these operations want bees for pollination. We're starting to see integrated urban food production systems that include vegetables, herbs, small livestock, and bees all in repurposed urban spaces. I worked with a project in Detroit where they converted an abandoned factory into a food production facility. Tilapia in tanks on the ground floor. The nutrient-rich water from the fish tanks irrigates vegetables growing in vertical systems. Bees pollinate the crops. Black soldier fly larvae process organic waste and become fish food. It's a closed-loop system producing food in the middle of a food desert. Is it going to feed the whole city? No, but it's employing local people, providing fresh produce to a neighborhood that had none, educating kids about food systems, and proving that urban food production can work. These experiments matter because as climate change intensifies, as transportation becomes more expensive, as supply chains prove fragile, local food production becomes more critical. Cities can't be completely self-sufficient, but they can be far more productive than they are now. And every rooftop garden, every urban farm, every pollinator corridor makes cities more resilient, not just for food production, but for climate adaptation. Green infrastructure manages stormwater. Plants cool neighborhoods during heat waves. Biodiverse spaces support mental health and community well-being. The bees are part of all of this. They're not the whole solution, but they're an essential thread in the fabric we're weaving. Now, let me talk about something we haven't addressed directly yet but has been underlying everything I've said. Loss, grief. Because if you care about bees, if you care about nature, you're going to experience loss in this era. I've lost count of how many colonies I've lost over the years. Each one hurts. You invest time, care, hope into these creatures, and then they're gone, collapsed from disease, starved from mist and weather, poisoned by pesticides drifting from neighboring fields. There are mornings when I've opened hive after hive to find them dead, and I've had to sit down and cry. Grown man crying over bees, but they're not just bees. They're indicators, they're warnings. They're dying because we've broken something fundamental in how we relate to the natural world. And I'm not alone in this grief. I talk to beekeepers worldwide, and this theme comes up constantly. The emotional toll of watching populations decline, of fighting harder each year just to maintain what we have, of knowing that what we're doing isn't enough. But here's what I've learned about that grief. You can let it paralyze you, or you can let it motivate you. You can give up, or you can fight harder. And the fight isn't just about keeping your own bees alive. It's about changing the systems that are killing them. This is why I speak at city councils about pesticide policies. Why I work with farmers on integrated pest management. Why I teach classes and give talks like this one. Because individual action isn't enough. We need systemic change. And systemic change requires people to understand what's at stake. It requires people to care. That's hard when the crisis is invisible to most people. When someone's biggest daily concern is traffic or headlines, not pollinator decline, how do you make them care? You connect it to what they already care about. Their food, their children's future. The beauty they notice when they slow down enough to see it. The taste of real honey. The buzz of a garden in summer. You make the invisible visible. You bring people into the hives. You let them taste the difference between honey from diverse forage and honey from monocultures. You show them the empty fields and the full gardens. You let them fall in love because people protect what they love. I've brought thousands of people into contact with bees over the years. School kids, corporate executives, retired teachers, young parents. And almost without exception, something changes in them when they see inside a hive for the first time. The organization, the cooperation, the purposefulness of it all. Thousands of individuals working together toward common goals without any central authority directing them. It's profound. It challenges our assumptions about intelligence, about consciousness, about what matters. People often ask me if bees are intelligent. It's the wrong question. Individual bees have tiny brains, but the colony as a whole exhibits intelligent behavior. decision-making, problem-solving, adaptation. The intelligence emerges from the collective. There's a less in there for us. Individual actions matter, but collective action is what changes systems. One person planting a pollinator garden is nice. 1,000 people doing it transforms a landscape. One farmer going regenerative is inspiring. A movement of farmers doing it changes agriculture. This is why community matters so much in this work. The beekeepers I know who last, who don't burn out, are the ones connected to communities. Local beekeeping associations, farming networks, environmental groups. They're not isolated. They're part of something larger than themselves. I'm part of a regenerative agriculture network that includes beekeepers, farmers, ranchers, researchers, and educators. We share knowledge. We support each other through failures. We celebrate successes together. We're building something that's bigger than any of us individually. And that network is global now. I'm in regular contact with beekeepers in Kenya working on forest conservation, with farmers in India integrating bees with traditional crops, with researchers in Brazil studying native stingless bees, with urban farmers in Japan creating rooftop ecosystems. The challenges we face are global, but the solutions are often local. What we're doing is sharing knowledge so each community can adapt approaches to their specific context. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, but there are principles that work everywhere. Those principles, again, are work with nature, not against it. Build soil, support diversity, integrate systems, think long-term, value resilience over maximum short-term production, treat animals and insects as partners, not resources to be exploited. These aren't new principles. Indigenous peoples have practiced them for thousands of years. Traditional farmers understood them. We've just forgotten in our rush to industrialize everything. But we're remembering, and not a moment too soon. Let me talk about timeline for a moment, because I think it's important to be realistic about where we are and where we're headed. Climate models suggest we have maybe a decade to make major changes before certain tipping points become irreversible. A decade? That sounds like a long time until you realize how long it takes to transform agricultural systems. It took me 5 years to fully transition my beekeeping operation to ecological management. 5 years of learning, adapting, making mistakes, refining approaches. And that's just one small operation. Transforming agriculture globally? That's a generational project. But we don't have generations, we have years. This is why rapid knowledge sharing is so critical. We can't afford for every farmer and beekeeper to spend 5 years figuring out what others already know. We need to compress learning curves. We need to share failures as openly as successes so others don't repeat our mistakes. This is one reason I'm so committed to education and outreach. Every person I teach is someone who might teach others. Every farmer I help transition is a demonstration site for neighbors. Every urban hive is a conversation starter. We're building momentum, and momentum matters when you're racing against time. But I'm not going to lie to you and say we're winning. Right now, we're losing. Pollinator populations continue to decline. Soil continues to degrade. The climate continues to warm. The industrial agricultural system continues to expand. But we're losing slower than we were. The rate of change is accelerating in the right direction. More farmers are transitioning to regenerative practices. More cities are implementing pollinator-friendly policies. More consumers are demanding sustainably produced food. More investors are funding ecological agriculture. The question is whether we can accelerate fast enough, and that depends on people, on you, and whether this message resonates enough that you change something in your life. Plant something, buy differently, vote differently, talk to others, support policies that help. Because here's the truth: I can manage my bees as ecologically as possible. But if my neighbor is spraying neonicotinoids, my bees are still at risk. I can create perfect habitat. But if climate change shifts flowering times faster than the bees can adapt, we're still in trouble. Individual responsibility is necessary but not sufficient. We need collective action. We need policy changes. We need economic incentives that reward regeneration instead of extraction. We need education systems that teach ecological literacy. We need a fundamental shift in how we value food and farming. That sounds overwhelming. It is overwhelming, but it's also happening, bit by bit. Farm by farm, city by city, the transformation is underway. Let me give you some concrete examples of hope. Because we need hope to sustain this work. In France, there's a movement called Tiers d'Eilines that's preserving farmland and helping young farmers access land to practice ecological agriculture. They've protected over 200 farms so far. Each one is a node in a growing network of regenerative operations. In the United States, the Savory Institute is working with ranchers on millions of acres to implement holistic grazing management. They're sequestering carbon, building soil, and proving that regenerative ranching is economically viable. In Ethiopia, beekeepers are protecting forests by creating value from forest products like honey. Communities that might have cut trees for charcoal are instead managing forests for bee forage. It's forest conservation through economic incentive. In Australia, urban farming initiatives are transforming cities. Melbourne has a goal of becoming a productive urban landscape where food production is integrated throughout the city. These aren't small pilot projects anymore. These are movements, they're growing. They're proving that alternatives to industrial agriculture work. And the data is backing them up. Long-term studies are showing that regenerative farms are more profitable than conventional ones when you account for all costs. They're more resilient to weather extremes. They produce more nutritious food. They sequester carbon. They support biodiversity. The economic case for ecological agriculture is becoming undeniable. That matters because money talks. When regenerative approaches are more profitable, more people will adopt them. If you have ever dreamed of living closer to nature, if you have ever imagined producing your own honey, if you feel that modern life is pulling you too far away from what really matters, then stay with me because this talk may change the way you see the land forever. Today I am not only speaking about beekeeping. I am speaking about a way of life. A modern, sustainable, and deeply human path. Behind me, you see this apiary. But this is not just a workplace. It is a living ecosystem. A balance between humans, insects, plants, soil, sun, rain, and time. I stand here not only as a beekeeper, but also as someone who works the land, who understands tractors, who lives alongside livestock, and who believes that the future of agriculture must be ecological, intelligent, and respectful. If you are watching this and thinking, maybe I could do this, to hold on to that thought, because every real beekeeper started exactly there. Let's begin with something many beginners underestimate: the location of the apiary. Beekeeping does not start when you buy bees. It starts when you observe the land. A good apiary needs morning sunlight, protection from strong winds, access to clean water, and a natural diversity of flowering plants. Your bees must live in harmony with their environment, not in conflict with it. Modern ecological beekeeping is not about forcing productivity. It is about creating the right conditions so the colony can develop naturally, strongly, and healthily. When the environment is right, the bees respond with strength, balance, and resilience. And this is where real beekeeping begins. Another important decision is the type of hive you choose. Langstroth, dad ant, lay ends, different systems, different philosophies. But no matter the model, the principle should always be the same: respect the natural behavior of the colony. We are not factory managers. We are not controlling machines. We are working with living beings that have their own intelligence, organization, and rhythm. A modern beekeeper uses technology and tools, yes, but never forgets that the bees come first. Not all bees are the same either. There are breeds that are calmer, breeds that are more resistant, breeds that are better adapted to cold climates, and others that tolerate heat and drought much better. Choosing the right bees is not about maximizing honey at all costs. It is about selecting colonies that belong to your environment, that support biodiversity, and that strengthen your local ecosystem. This is where beekeeping becomes something bigger than production. It becomes responsibility. If you are still listening, it means something inside you already understands this connection, even if you can't fully explain it yet. And that is exactly how this journey begins. Now, let's talk about something that is both practical and symbolic: the beekeeper's clothing. The protective suit, gloves, and veil are not just safety measures, they are a statement of respect for the bees and for yourself. When you wear them, you create a boundary of trust. You are careful not to harm them, and they can work without fear. Modern beekeepers often complement traditional suits with lighter, breathable materials, and even small cameras or sensors to monitor the hives. Technology should always serve life, not dominate it. To begin, you will need basic tools: a smoker to calm the bees, a hive tool for inspection, and a brush to gently move bees without causing harm. For the beginner, simplicity is key. Overloading with gadgets can distract from the most important lesson: understanding the colony. Everything you do should be deliberate and calm. Every gesture matters. The bees feel your presence and respond accordingly. One of the most exciting parts of beekeeping is harvesting honey. But modern ecological practices teach us patience. You only take what the bees can spare. If you plan to scale, even slightly, you will need proper facilities for extraction and bottling. This doesn't have to be industrial. A clean, organized workspace is enough. Hygiene, order, and respect for the product are the pillars of professional work. And remember, your honey tells a story. The flowers your bees visited, the seasons they endured, the care you provided. Treat it as something sacred, not merely as a commodity. Many beginners overlook this. Beekeeping is regulated for good reasons. Understanding local laws about hive registration, honey labeling, and disease control protects both you and your bees. Sustainable beekeeping is not just an ecological choice. It is a legal and ethical responsibility. When you respect the rules, you ensure the health of your colonies, your neighbors, and the integrity of your craft. Every element of beekeeping, from clothing to hive choice, equipment, extraction, and legislation, forms a web of responsibility. Modern ecological beekeeping is about observation first, action second. It's about working with nature, not against it. It's about combining tradition with modern knowledge and care with innovation. Every beekeeper starts as a beginner, but every action they take shapes the future of the bees and the land. Look at these hives. Every one of them contains thousands of lives, thousands of stories, and thousands of lessons. And the more you observe, the more you understand that beekeeping is a mirror. It reflects patience, persistence, humility, and respect. If you feel inspired, remember this is just the beginning. Stay with me, because in upcoming sections we will explore even more details about equipment, hive management, and seasonal care. By the end of this journey, you will not only know the basics, you will feel what it means to be part of a living ecosystem. Now let's continue with more practical aspects of beekeeping. The clothing you wear is your first tool. A well-fitted suit, gloves, and veil not only protect you, but also show respect to your bees. When you move calmly and deliberately, the colony senses your presence and reacts with harmony. Modern beekeepers often use lightweight materials, ventilation systems, and even sensors to monitor hive health. The key is balance. Technology assists, but never replaces observation. Next is the essential equipment every beginner must have. Smoker to gently calm the bees during inspections. Hot tool for lifting frames and managing the hive. Bee brush to move bees without harm. Containers for honey collection. Simplicity is crucial. Too many tools can distract from understanding your colony's behavior. Every action should be deliberate. Every gesture matters. When it comes to honey extraction, patience is your ally. Take only what the bees can spare. Respect their work and their needs. If you set up a small extraction area, ensure it is clean and organized. Proper hygiene and order reflect professionalism and care. Remember, each jar of honey tells a story. The flowers visited, the seasons endured, and the attention given by the beekeeper. Treat it as a living product, not a commodity. Understanding legislation is equally important. Register your hives, follow labeling rules, and comply with disease control regulations. This protects your bees, your neighbors, and your business. Ecological beekeeping is about responsibility, ethical, legal, and environmental. Respecting the law is part of respecting life itself. Now, let's discuss the modern philosophy of ecological beekeeping. Observation first, action second. Work with nature, not against it. Blend traditional knowledge with modern innovation. Every decision affects the colony, the land, and your future as a beekeeper. Every beginner will face challenges, but every careful choice strengthens the ecosystem and your connection to it. Look at these hives. Each one contains thousands of lives, intricate patterns, and lessons about patience, humility, and persistence. The more you watch, the more you realize that beekeeping mirrors life itself. Patience, respect, and observation guide every action. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you are ready to start this journey. This is only the beginning. Stay with me as we explore deeper into hive management, seasonal care, and advanced equipment in upcoming sections. By the end of this hour, you will not only know the basics, you will feel what it truly means to be part of a living ecosystem. Managing your hives requires consistency, attention, and respect. Each hive is unique. Some colonies are strong and productive. Others are delicate and cautious. Learning to read the signs, the movement of bees, the shape of the comb, the presence of brood is the heart of successful beekeeping. Modern beekeepers balance tradition with innovation. They use record typing, seasonal calendars, and even simple digital monitoring to track hive health and growth. But no tool replaces observation and intuition. Seasonal planning is crucial. Spring is a time of preparation. Inspect hives carefully, ensure the queen is healthy, and provide supplemental feeding if necessary. Summer is the season of abundance. Flowers bloom, colonies expand, and honey stores grow. Autumn is reflection and conservation. Prepare hives for winter, protect them from pests, and ensure enough food remains. Winter is quiet observation, minimal disturbance. Only essential checks, the colony rests, storing energy for the next cycle. Following the rhythm of the seasons connects you to the natural flow of life. It teaches patience, humility, and a deeper understanding of nature. Every beekeeper, beginner or experienced, must also consider the long-term vision. Plan your apiary layout carefully. Consider accessibility for inspections and honey collection, protection from weather, and the diversity of local flora. This is not only practical, it is ecological. The health of the land and the colony are intertwined. Your role is to guide and protect, not dominate. You become a guardian, a teacher, and a learner at the same time. Every hive tells a story. Every frame, every comb, every buzzing colony teaches a lesson. Respect the bees, understand their language, and your journey as a beekeeper will flourish. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like to join this journey of modern, sustainable beekeeping. Stay tuned for future sessions where we will explore detailed equipment reviews, seasonal hive management techniques, specific bee breeds and their unique characteristics, advanced extraction methods, legal updates and industry insights. By the end of this series, you will not just know how to start, you will feel what it truly means to be part of a living ecosystem, and you will be ready to take your first steps with confidence and care. There is something deeply transformative that happens when you spend enough time among the hives. At first, you hear only noise. Then, slowly, you begin to hear meaning. You recognize calm, tension, strength, weakness. You learn when a colony is thriving and when it needs help. This connection cannot be learned from books alone. It is built with time, presence, and respect. Many people arrive to beekeeping searching for honey. But those who stay because they discover something deeper: purpose. Working with bees changes the way you look at agriculture, at technology, and even at progress. A modern beekeeper does not reject innovation. Instead, they use it wisely. Solar-powered fences, moisture sensors, temperature monitoring, lightweight tools, efficient extractors. These are not enemies of tradition. They are allies when used with intelligence and ethics. Beekeeping fits naturally within a modern ecological farm. Bees improve pollination for crops. Healthy landscapes improve honey quality. Responsible grazing improves floral diversity. Smart use of machinery protects the soil. Everything becomes connected. Apiculture, tractors, livestock, soil, water, biodiversity. This is not romanticism. This is functional sustainability. If you are listening carefully, you may start to realize that this path is not about escaping modern life. It is about redefining it. It is about building a future where productivity and respect for life can exist together. Many beginners ask, how many hives should I start with? The honest answer is fewer than you think. Start small, learn deeply, grow slowly. A strong foundation is always better than fast expansion without understanding. Every inspection is a dialogue. You open the hive. You observe. You interpret. You decide. This rhythm develops discipline, patience, and responsibility. These qualities do not stay in the apiary. They follow you into every aspect of your life. And if at this point you feel that this message resonates with you, that this way of thinking connects with something personal, then I invite you clearly and honestly subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Not for numbers, but because this space is being built for people who truly care about doing things the right way. This journey does not end with one talk. It grows with every season, every question, every experience shared. In future sessions, we will go deeper. We will talk specifically about different hive models and when to use each. We will explore detailed protective clothing and professional-grade equipment. We will analyze real extraction rooms and how to design them properly. We will study bee behavior, disease prevention, queen management, and seasonal strategies. We will even discuss the real economics side of beekeeping, without myths and without illusions. But everything begins here, with respect, with observation, with intention. Because beekeeping is not something you do. It is something you become. There is also a truth that many videos never show you: beekeeping is beautiful, but it is not always easy. You will lose colonies. You will doubt your decisions. You will face weather that you cannot control, flowering seasons that fail, and moments where you feel you have done everything right and still things go wrong. And yet this is exactly where the real beekeeper is born. Because in those moments you learn responsibility. You learn humility. You learn that nature is not something to dominate, but something to understand. This is why ecological beekeeping is not a trend. It is a mindset. It forces you to ask better questions. How can I support the bees instead of exploiting them? How can I improve the environment instead of exhausting it? How can I produce with dignity instead of pressure? Modern tools help, yes. Data helps. Mechanization helps. But ethics must always guide the hand that uses them. When you manage hives with this philosophy, you begin to notice something extraordinary. Your colonies become more resilient. Your honey gains character. Your work gains meaning. People who consume your honey will feel it. Not because of marketing, but because authenticity always leaves a trace. And this is why this channel exists. Not to create viral content, but to build knowledge, to build respect, to build a community of people who want to work with nature, not against it. If you are still here listening, you are already part of that community. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you believe that agriculture, apiculture, and rural life deserve a future that is intelligent, ethical, and sustainable. Because the future of beekeeping will not be built by those who seek shortcuts. It will be built by those who are willing to observe, learn, fail, improve, and persist. And in the next sessions we will continue this path together. When you walk into an apiary with the right mindset, you stop being a visitor and start becoming a participant in something much larger than yourself. You begin to notice the small details: the rhythm of the flight, the subtle changes in sound, the way the bees respond to temperature, light, and even your own mood. This awareness transforms the way you approach every aspect of rural work. You start thinking differently about how you use machinery. You become more careful with how the soil is treated. You pay closer attention to water sources, to flowering cycles, to the impact of chemicals far beyond your own land. A modern ecological beekeeper understands that every decision creates consequences. Using fewer chemicals means healthier bees. Supporting local flora means stronger colonies. Choosing sustainable practices means long-term productivity instead of short-term gains. This way of working does not make you slower. It makes you wiser. Beekeeping teaches you to value time. Not the rush time of deadlines and pressure, but natural time. The time it takes for a colony to grow. The time it takes for nectar to transform into honey. The time it takes for experience to become true knowledge. Many people search for quick results. Few are willing to build something that lasts. And yet, everything truly valuable in agriculture is built slowly. If you are still listening, it means you understand that deep down. That is why this space exists. To offer clarity in a world full of shortcuts. To offer honest guidance instead of empty promises. To show the real path: demanding, but deeply rewarding. Because beekeeping done correctly does not only produce honey. It produces balance. It produces awareness. It produces a different kind of future. And that future begins with people like you who choose to stay, to learn, and to care. There is a moment every beekeeper remembers. The first time you open a hive and feel no fear, only calm. The first time you recognize the queen without searching. The first time you taste honey from your own colonies and realize you did not simply harvest a product, you earned a relationship. These moments are not bought. They are built. Built through patience. Built through mistakes. Built through mornings when you wake early to check the weather, and evenings when you replay every inspection in your mind, wondering how to improve. This is why beekeeping cannot be separated from the rest of rural life. You begin to understand how flowering depends on rainfall, how soil health affects plant diversity, how livestock management influences the surrounding ecosystem, how the way you drive machinery, how you manage land, how you treat margins and wild areas, all of it eventually reaches the bees. A modern beekeeper does not work in isolation. They become a steward of a living system. And this is exactly what the world needs more of: people who understand interdependence, people who think long-term, people who value resilience over speed. If this message feels different from what you usually hear, that is intentional. Because real beekeeping is not about shortcuts. It is about commitment. It is about showing up even when the harvest is small. It is about continuing even after losses. It is about learning when things go wrong instead of giving up. And those who walk this path seriously are never truly beginners for long. They become observers, then practitioners, then guardians. This is not just about producing honey. This is about becoming part of something that existed long before us and must continue long after us. And if you are still here, still listening, still reflecting, then perhaps this path is not as distant from you as you once thought. There is also a responsibility that comes with knowledge. Once you understand what bees need, you can no longer ignore the impact of your choices. You begin to question the use of aggressive chemicals. You begin to protect wildflowers instead of removing them. You begin to value biodiversity not as a concept, but as a daily practice. This is where beekeeping becomes leadership. Not leadership over bees, but leadership by example. When neighbors see healthy colonies, strong pollination, and consistent honey quality, they start asking questions. They start paying attention. They start considering change. And slowly, without conflict, without preaching, transformation begins. This is the power of doing things correctly. A single well-managed apiary can influence an entire landscape. A single committed beekeeper can influence an entire community. And every beginner who chooses the ecological path strengthens this movement. You do not need to be perfect to start. You only need to be honest with your intention. Learn, observe, adapt, improve. That is the real cycle of sustainable agriculture. Some days you will feel confident. Other days you will feel uncertain. Both are part of the process. Because growth does not happen in comfort. It happens in attention. The bees teach this without words. They show it in their organization, their resilience, their capacity to adapt without losing balance. If you allow yourself to learn from them, they will make you better. Not only as a beekeeper, but as a person. And that is perhaps the most powerful truth of this path. Beekeeping does not just change how you work, it changes how you see the world. At some point, you stop measuring progress only in kilograms of honey. You begin to measure it in quieter ways. In the strength of your colonies after winter. In the calm behavior of your bees during inspections. In the balance you see between production and survival. This is when you understand that success in beekeeping is not about speed. It is about stability. Many people enter this world looking for quick results. But bees teach you a different logic. Slow growth, consistent care, and respect for natural rhythms always outperform impatience. A modern ecological beekeeper learns to design systems that support life instead of exhausting it. Planting flowering trees and hedgerows. Protecting water sources. Leaving space for wild nature. Reducing interventions when the colony is healthy. These choices may seem small, but together they create resilience. And resilience is the true wealth of any agricultural project. You also begin to understand that mistakes are not failures. They are information. Each loss teaches something. Each difficulty reveals what must be improved. This mindset transforms frustration into learning, and learning into long-term strength. This is why beekeeping is one of the most honest activities you can choose. It reflects your decisions clearly. You cannot hide behind marketing or excuses. The bees respond only to reality. And perhaps that is why so many people feel deeply connected to this path. Because in a world full of noise, beekeeping offers clarity. It strips things down to what truly matters. Attention, responsibility, consistency, and respect. If you stay on this path, you will not only produce honey, you will produce knowledge. You will produce balance. You will produce impact. And step by step, season by season, hive by hive, you will realize that this is no longer something you are learning. It is something you are becoming. There is a quiet discipline that develops over time in every serious beekeeper. You begin to plan ahead without forcing the future. You learn to prepare without controlling. You act with intention, but you accept uncertainty. This discipline changes the way you manage everything. Your schedule, your land, your resources, your expectations. You no longer chase productivity blindly. You design systems that can survive bad seasons, not only good ones. This is where modern beekeeping meets intelligent agriculture. You start asking smarter questions. How can I reduce stress on the colonies? How can I simplify my management without losing quality? How can I make my operation more efficient while remaining ethical? How can I use machinery in a way that protects soil, plants, and pollinators? The answers are never universal. They are personal. They depend on your land, your climate, your goals, your values. And that is why copying others rarely works long term. You must observe your own bees. You must study your own environment. You must build your own system. This is not weakness. This is mastery. When you reach this point, you realize something important. You are no longer following beekeeping. You are practicing it. You stop asking, "What should I do?" And you begin asking, "What are my bees telling me?" That shift changes everything. Because beekeeping is not controlled from textbooks. It is guided from presence, from consistency, from attention. And slowly, without you even noticing at first, you begin to earn something that cannot be bought. Trust. Trust from your colonies. Trust from other beekeepers. Trust from clients who taste the difference. Trust from yourself. That is when this work stops feeling like an experiment and starts feeling like a path. Over time, you begin to understand that beekeeping is not a hobby you visit when you have free time. It becomes a rhythm that shapes your days, your decisions, and even your mindset. You check the weather differently. You observe flowering periods more carefully. You pay attention to subtle changes in temperature, humidity, and wind. All because somewhere in your mind, the bees are always present. This is not obsession. This is awareness. And awareness is one of the most valuable skills any farmer, beekeeper, or rural professional can develop. A modern ecological operation is built on this awareness. You start designing your land with intention. You think about access paths for tractors that avoid disturbing hives. You plan grazing areas to protect flowering zones. You preserve natural margins instead of removing them. You begin to see your property not as separate activities, but as one integrated system. Apiculture, livestock, machinery, soil, vegetation, water, everything starts to work together instead of competing. This integration is not theory. It is practical, efficient, and deeply sustainable. And the most interesting part is this. When your system becomes healthier, your workload often becomes lighter. Fewer problems, fewer emergencies, fewer interventions. Because nature, when supported instead of forced, organizes itself better than any plan. Many beginners fear that ecological approaches mean lower productivity. In reality, the opposite is often true in the long term. Healthy colonies live longer. Stable systems require fewer corrections. Strong landscapes recover faster from stress. Sustainability is not weakness. It is intelligence applied over time. If you are still here, still listening, still engaged, then you are not just watching a video. You are already thinking like someone who belongs to this world. And that is exactly the point where transformation begins. There comes a stage where you begin to understand the deeper value of continuity. Not just continuity of production, but continuity of care. You start thinking in years instead of weeks. You imagine what your apiary will look like in 5 seasons. You consider what kind of landscape you want to leave behind, not only what you want to harvest. This long-term vision changes everything. You become more selective with your actions. You intervene less impulsively. You observe more before deciding. Because you understand that every intervention carries consequences that echo beyond the present moment. A mature beekeeper is not the one who does more. It is the one who knows when to do less. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn, and also one of the most powerful. Many beginners believe that constant manipulation leads to better results. But with time, you realize that excessive interference often creates more problems than it solves. Healthy colonies, placed in healthy environments, often require surprisingly little disturbance. This is the elegance of good beekeeping. Silent efficiency, invisible balance, consistent stability. And when you reach this understanding, something shifts again. You stop seeing bees as units of production. You begin to see them as partners in a shared system. You respect their intelligence. You admire their organization. You protect their conditions instead of forcing their behavior. This mindset does not make you weaker as a producer. It makes you stronger as a professional. Because your work becomes resilient. Your results become consistent. Your reputation becomes solid. People trust honey that comes from care. People respect practices that are honest. People recognize when something is built with integrity. That recognition does not come overnight. But when it comes, it lasts. And that is one of the most valuable things this path can offer. Not fast success, but durable credibility. If you continue walking this road, season after season, choice after choice, you will slowly realize that you are no longer trying to become a beekeeper. You already are one. There is also a quiet pride that grows with experience. Not pride in numbers, not pride in yield, but pride in craftsmanship. You begin to notice it when you open a hive and everything feels balanced. The brood is compact. The bees are calm. The frames are clean. The rhythm is healthy. That moment tells you more than any certificate ever could. This is when you realize that good beekeeping is not loud. It does not seek attention. It does not need to prove itself constantly. It simply works. And people notice. Neighbors begin to ask how you manage your colonies. Other beekeepers begin to observe your results. Consumers begin to trust your honey without needing persuasion. Because consistency speaks louder than promotion. A modern ecological beekeeper builds reputation slowly through actions, not words. Through clean practices. Through respect for animals. Through transparency. Through patience. And that reputation becomes one of your strongest tools. You will also notice something else. Your mindset outside the apiary changes too. You become more patient in everyday life. More attentive to detail. More thoughtful before acting. More aware of cause and effect. Beekeeping does not stay in the hives. It follows you home. It follows you into your work. It follows you into your relationships. That is why many who start this path describe it as more than an activity. They describe it as a teacher. Not a teacher that speaks, but a teacher that shows. Every season shows you something. Every challenge shows you something. Every success shows you something. And slowly, without forcing it, you begin to understand one of the deepest truths of this craft. You do not master beekeeping. You grow alongside it. The bees change. The climate changes. The landscape changes. You change. The work never becomes static. It remains alive. And that is exactly why it remains meaningful. Because when something continues to teach you, when something continues to challenge you, when something continues to require your presence and your respect, it keeps you connected to reality. And in a world increasingly disconnected from natural processes, that connection is no longer just valuable. It is essential. At this stage, you begin to see the broader impact of your work. Your hives are no longer isolated units. They are part of a network that sustains the environment around you. Healthy bees pollinate local plants, which supports biodiversity. Strong colonies ensure your crops thrive without excessive chemicals. Thoughtful land management preserves soil, water, and natural habitats. Everything you do ripples outward. Your decisions affect not only your apiary but the surrounding ecosystem. This is why modern ecological beekeeping is not only a personal endeavor, it is a community responsibility. You also begin to notice how small habits accumulate over time. Regular inspections, careful record typing, and consistent maintenance create stability. Skipping steps may seem harmless, but over time small errors compound, affecting colony health and honey production. And that is the lesson that experience teaches. Discipline is more valuable than shortcuts. Observation is more important than assumptions. Respect is more impactful than control. Beekeeping also teaches emotional resilience. You experience losses, colonies that fail, seasons that underperform, unexpected weather events. But instead of discouragement, you learn to adapt. You learn to analyze, reflect, and improve. Every difficulty becomes a teacher. Every challenge strengthens your skill. Every setback reinforces your commitment to sustainable practices. When you fully embrace this perspective, your work transcends simple production. It becomes a craft, a responsibility, and a source of fulfillment. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you are committed to building a future that is ethical, sustainable, and deeply connected to nature. The journey is long, but every step strengthens both you and your colonies. And with patience, care, and observation, you will see the rewards not just in honey, but in life itself. As you continue your journey, you begin to notice patterns you never saw before. The way bees communicate through movement, the subtle shifts in hive temperature, the rhythm of nectar flow through the seasons. These details tell a story if you are willing to listen. Each inspection becomes an exercise in mindfulness. You watch the bees work and you start to understand their needs without speaking. You sense when a colony is stressed, when it is healthy, and when it is ready to expand. This awareness spills over into all aspects of farm life. You manage livestock with more empathy. You rotate crops more intelligently. And you plan machinery use more thoughtfully. Every element of your farm begins to work in harmony because you are now attuned to patterns, cycles, and connections. Beekeeping teaches you patience, but it also teaches foresight. You learn to plan months in advance, to anticipate seasonal changes, and to prepare your colonies for the unexpected. This foresight is a skill that extends beyond the apiary. It becomes part of how you approach every project in life. The beauty of modern ecological beekeeping is that it rewards observation and careful planning, not for shortcuts. When you respect the rhythm of nature, your colonies grow stronger, your honey is richer, and your work becomes more meaningful. And through it all, you begin to understand one profound truth. The best results are not measured in kilograms of honey, but in the health of your bees, the balance of your land, and the strength of the ecosystem you help sustain. Every season reinforces this lesson. Every success reminds you why you started. Every challenge teaches humility and resilience. If you are still here, listening and learning, then you are already walking the path of a responsible, modern, and ecological beekeeper. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like to continue growing with this community and to stay informed on the next steps in your journey. As the seasons pass, your perspective continues to deepen. You no longer see each hive as a separate unit, but as part of a living, interconnected system. The success of one colony depends on the health of the others, the diversity of surrounding plants, and the care you provide to the land as a whole. You notice subtle shifts in nature, early blooms, late frosts, or changes in local insect populations. These signals teach you adaptability, patience, and humility. You learn to act deliberately rather than react impulsively. Every decision is informed by observation, experience, and respect for life. At this stage, you also begin to understand the intangible rewards, the quiet moments in the apiary, the gentle hum of healthy bees, the satisfaction of seeing colonies thrive under your care. These are the true markers of progress. The honey you harvest is no longer merely a product. It is the result of harmony between human effort and natural processes. And now, as we approach the end of this talk, it is time to reflect. The journey of a beekeeper is ongoing, filled with lessons, surprises, and growth. What began as curiosity evolves into responsibility, awareness, and connection. You have learned that modern ecological beekeeping is not only a method, it is a way of life. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you are ready to embrace this path. And stay tuned for future sessions where we will explore each aspect of beekeeping in more detail. The story does not end here, it continues in every hive, every season, and in every beekeeper willing to walk this path with care and dedication. As you step back and observe your apiary, you begin to see the bigger picture. Every hive, every colony, every flower, every tool, and every decision contributes to a delicate balance. Beekeeping is no longer a series of tasks, it becomes a philosophy. You notice how even small actions make a difference. Planting a few extra flowering plants increases nectar diversity. Leaving hedgerows intact provides shelter and habitat. Minimizing chemical use strengthens colonies and the surrounding ecosystem. These choices, repeated season after season, create resilience that lasts far beyond a single harvest. The lessons learned here extend beyond the apiary. Patience, observation, responsibility, and care become part of your daily life. You approach challenges with a calmer mind and a longer view. You understand that every decision has consequences, and that respect for life brings lasting rewards. And now, as this session comes to a close, remember this: the journey of a beekeeper is never truly finished. It is continuous, evolving with every season, every observation, and every choice you make. What matters most is the commitment to act thoughtfully, sustainably, and ethically. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you want to continue learning, exploring, and growing as a modern ecological beekeeper. This is not the end, it is simply the beginning of a lifelong path filled with discovery. care, and connection to the natural world. Your journey has only just started, and every step you take will shape the future of your apiary and the life around it. As we draw this session to its conclusion, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for joining me here today. Your presence, your attention, and your willingness to learn mean more than you might realize. Beekeeping is a path that requires dedication, patience, and care, and taking the time to understand is the first step toward truly meaningful practice. We hope that this session has been useful for you. Whether you are a complete beginner or already have some experience, the principles we discussed today, observation, ecological respect, ethical practices, and careful planning, are essential foundations for any beekeeper. The journey does not end here. There is so much more to explore, and we are committed to providing many more sessions, each focused on a different aspect of beekeeping. In upcoming talks, you will learn in detail about selecting and managing the right type of hives for your environment, understanding and caring for different bee breeds, choosing and using the correct protective clothing and equipment, efficient and sustainable honey extraction and storage, legal requirements and best practices for a safe and compliant apiary, seasonal strategies to maximize both colony health and productivity. Each session will build on the knowledge you gained today, providing practical, professional, and ecologically sound guidance. We want you to feel confident in every step you take in your beekeeping journey. Remember, modern ecological beekeeping is about more than honey. It is about building a connection with nature, a relationship with your land, and a deep understanding of life itself. Every decision you make as a beekeeper resonates beyond the hive. It affects the environment, the community, and the future of the craft. So as we close this talk, I encourage you to reflect on what you've learned today. Think about your own apiary, your own land, and the ways you can apply these principles to make a positive impact. Small, thoughtful actions create long-term change. Respect, patience, observation, and care are the most powerful tools you will ever have. And above all, remember that you are not alone on this journey. This community of beekeepers, learners, and nature enthusiasts is here to support you. By staying engaged, asking questions, and participating in future sessions, you will continue to grow your knowledge and skills. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like so that you don't miss our upcoming P1 NCIs, which will explore every aspect of beekeeping in even greater detail. From hive management to advanced seasonal strategies, from ecological practices to legislation and safety, we will guide you step by step. Thank you again for accompanying us today. Your curiosity, commitment, and passion for learning are what make this work meaningful. We hope you found this session insightful, inspiring, and practical. Remember, the path of a beekeeper is long and evolving. It is filled with discovery, growth, and connection. And while today is the end of this particular session, it is only the beginning of a much larger journey. Stay tuned for our future P1 NCIs. We will continue to explore, teach, and share everything you need to know to become a confident, responsible, and modern ecological beekeeper. Together, we can nurture not only our bees, but our land, our communities, and the next generation of beekeepers. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for committing to this path. We look forward to seeing you again in our next session. Until then, observe, care, and continue building your connection with the natural world. The journey has only just begun, and your role as a guardian of nature is already underway. Let's walk this path together, one hive at a time. Thank you, and see you soon in our next P1 Chia.